Hi, this is Jen Rubin. I've got great news. I'm going to be appearing live with the one and only George Conway. Yes, at the 92nd Street Y in New York City, November 12th. Get your tickets now. You can go to the 92nd Street Y website, or you can go to politicon.com/tour. It's going to be wild.
Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week our guests are esteemed pollsters Jim Gerstein and Dr. Whit Ayers. Now remember, we love taking your questions, so write into politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Puticon for next week's show. We're going to get to as many as we can, but don't forget to tell us where you're from. Before we get started, get out your calendars. James and I are taking Politics War Room on tour, so come see us live this Saturday night in Boston Schubert Theater, November 2nd. It's only 2 days away, so get those few tickets remaining right now at politicon.com/tour. TOUR. We can't wait to see you there. In other exciting news, the documentary Carville, Winning is Everything Stupid, is out now. Get updates and some great behind-the-scenes content by following James on Twitter @JamesCarville and on, get this, his new TikTok @RealJamesCarville. You also can get text updates about what's coming next for Puticon and Politics War Room by signing up at Puticon.com. Tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please check out the links to our sponsors, HelloFresh, Naked Wines, and Laundry Sauce. We thank you for supporting these sponsors. It really helps make this podcast happen. All right, James, both candidates gave what was billed as their closing message. It couldn't have been different. First, Harris had 75,000 people, credibly, on the ellipse. I don't know that Trump has had any crowd that size this fall, and he's always into the mine is bigger than yours obsession, so that must have just driven him crazy. But there was a profound difference in tone and substance. Trump turned Madison Square Garden, as former NBA great Bill Bradley wrote, into a cathedral of hate, spewing divisive venom. I would tell our listeners out there to get Wednesday's New York Daily News to read that Bradley column about how Trump sullied a place where real winners play. And one of the undercards in that speech, vetted, by the way, by the Trump team, insulted Puerto Ricans. There are close to 300,000 Puerto Rican voters in Pennsylvania, and they heard about it. I thought that Harris started a little slow, but then she picked up, and it was one of her better speeches. She drew the contrast, but she also reached out and promised to be a president of those who voted for her and those against her. The only downside was when President Biden, trying to criticize the Trump bigot, suggested Trump supporters were garbage. Let me just say this, Mr. President, you've had a good run, but why don't you spend the final 5 days in the Situation Room and away from the political trail? But Harris overall is closing with a little momentum, James.
Yeah, I mean, look, the whole thing what Biden said, obviously, it was all hinged on how you interpret it or the apostrophe or not. I mean, it's so, and of course, it's the giant outrage. They were outraged, and people were outraged about the remark about Puerto Rico and women, everything else. And they outraged about this, and they go for it. The thing to remember about Trump, they're not trying to be anything other than who they are. I don't think they were upset at all with the Madison Square Garden event. I think that Trump wants to say, I told you exactly what I was going to do, and I went out and did it. If he wins, I'm big into this. Is there going to be a wolf in sheep's clothing, or whatever expression you want to use? He's a wolf in a wolf's clothing. He's just telling you everything that he's going to do, every piece of misogyny, of racism you can think about, and he doesn't back away from it. He goes right into it.
It's who he is.
Yes, but he's not trying to. He's usually duplicitous and lies. He's not lying about this.
Right.
At all. It is who he is.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. And you saw that on display. It couldn't have been any worse than the shit they were saying. And you're right.
Well, as I said, James, it was vetted. It wasn't.
Yes, it was vetted. They went through it line by line. Okay, they don't. There's no evidence that Trump or any people close to him regret what happened. I'm not sure that Trump doesn't think it was a success. I'm really not. It's just two different universes that we live in. I mean, one where, in the Democratic universe, racism, sure, it exists, but it's a terrible thing. And in the Trump universe, yes, racism exists, and there's not enough of it, so we need more. That's fucking stunning, man.
Yeah.
It's just stunning.
James, on a little bit later, now, one of my very favorite stories from this campaign is Virginia Republican Derek Anderson, who is running for an open seat. Now, he's not married. He doesn't have any kids.
Okay.
So he did what seems natural to a Trumpite.
A childless dog man.
A friend's wife and children for a campaign photo of a happy family.
Oh.
James, why didn't you ever think of that? Just borrow a family.
Yeah, I was 48 before I got married. Maybe was it 48, 40? I think I was 49 on the day I got married. Yeah, it's 49. I could have borrowed a family.
No. I'm talking about a candidate borrowing a family for a campaign photo shot.
Right. I don't know. It was stunning. It's stunning hypocrisy. It's always talking about family values and this and that. And I wonder if it's going to cost the guy any votes. I don't know. I hope it does. But
I don't know. It's a tough race.
It's a tough race. You're right. It was breath. Now they're kicking people off the voting rolls.
Oh my God! I almost forgot. If anyone doubted, this is not the United States Supreme Court. It's the Republicans' United States Court. Once again, Glenn Youngkin. Oh my God, James! Glenn Youngkin is kicking people off the rolls because of supposedly undocumented migrants. They can't find any. But they're still kicking them off. And a lower court said, you just can't do that 10 days before the election or a week before the election. But the Republican U.S. Supreme Court, John Roberts and Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito and Brett Kavanaugh and who am I forgetting? Amy Coney Barrett, Neil Gorsuch. No, we don't want to do anything that hurts the Republican Party. It is a cause for concern. Any post-election legal issue.
I'm wrong about things. I'm right about things. The thing that I've never been wrong about is they are a pack of fucking hacks. Yeah. And I've thought that the whole time. They're not people that look at the statute with a slightly different interpretation than someone else would. Or look at the Constitution. They wouldn't know what a fucking Constitution is. They never heard of the 14th. In effect, this course decided to repeal the 14th Amendment. It just doesn't exist. Yeah. I don't know how Supreme Court, eradicates a constitutional amendment, but they do. And I think by now people have come around to understand that this is just part of Mitch McConnell's operation, but even crazier than him.
James, any thoughts about the continuing controversy over the Washington Post and Jeff Bezos and not endorsing?
I don't know. I read the Post story today. I mean, it aired a pretty good bit of dirty laundry. But what I honestly think is this. If, in fact, I'm assuming that Trump put heat on Bezos, I mean, I'm pretty clear this is what happened, on Bezos not to endorse. I actually think the whole way it played out helped Harris more than just if they would have just endorsed and shut up. That would have been the greatest non-event of the whole cycle. All right? But the fact that whoever it is that wrote that op-ed piece for Jeff Bezos, I tell Jeff Bezos this, why don't you pay me a fucking $1 million? I could write, I could get 100 monkeys on 100 typewriters and come up with something better than that. It made no sense. Nothing held together. And basically, the argument is people don't trust the press anymore, but I'm a billionaire, and people really trust billionaires. So it was dumb on steroids. And again, I think that they were acting at the behest of Donald Trump, and I think it's not big, but they would have been better off just printing it and no one would have cared. The story is just eating up space, and it looks like billionaires are protecting Trump. But I don't have any doubt that
well, Trump, Trump took away a very lucrative contract from Amazon, a computer cloud computer contract from the Pentagon. And I think it's hard to believe that Mr. Bezos doesn't think that it's going to be better for his business if he doesn't endorse. I've got news for him. Trump didn't take that away because they endorsed Biden in 2020. He took it away because they did very tough reporting on Donald Trump. And when there's a scandal, and there will be if Trump is elected, when some of those great Post investigative reporters, Carol Leonnig and the others, write an expose of what Trump's doing. You know what? I'm sorry, Jeff Bezos, who heretofore has been a really, really good owner of the Post. He's going to come after you again.
Bezos would say, look, I'm protecting my shareholders. I got an obligation to them. That's the answer to everything. Look, I wouldn't do this, but I have a fiduciary duty to my shareholders. And as the great Nobel Prize winning Milton Friedman said, who had many backers in DC opinion, that the single purpose of a corporation is to deliver value to shareholders. And I thought, in line with my fiduciary obligation to my shareholders, the best thing to do would be to do this. They can't admit it, but that's what it was. That's what he was saying.
Solace for anybody who works at that great newspaper. But anyway, we'll see what happens. This weekend, James and I are coming to Boston Schubert Theater for a live show, November 2. You're going to have a blast spending the run-up to the election with us in Boston. So tell them about what we have planned, James.
Well, we got maybe my favorite, arguably my favorite person in the entire world, Doris Kearns Goodwin, who's not just an eminent historian of the first order, but it is true sports fan, baseball fan. She had one of the most interesting marriages. She wrote about it to Richard Goodwin. She's charming. She's everything that you would ever want in a guest. And I think we're just going to have a delightful time. I really do.
Well, I couldn't agree more. You won't want to miss it. So go to putacon.com/tour and get your ticket for this Saturday, November 2nd at the Schubert Theater in Boston, Massachusetts. Now, don't wait. They're going fast, and we want to see as many of you there as we can. So head to putacon.com/tour now to get your tickets. The link is also in our show notes.
Make home cooking easy with HelloFresh. That's, first of all, the stuff is really tasty. Okay, I can tell you that, vouch for that in any way, shape, or form. It's unbelievably inexpensive because the thing that you have, particularly if you're like me, or if Mary and I, my kids are both kind of gone, the amount of food waste that a couple or a single person has is just breathtaking. You have no food waste with this. It's really amazing. And it's amazing how good it tastes, how easy it is, and how economical it is. And it's also, exactly what you're eating, exactly what the fat content is, if anything. I don't know if you watch it, or maybe you watch your sodium content, or maybe you watch whatever else, or maybe you're somebody that just likes to know what's going in your mouth, and you know exactly what it is when you get to yourself. I think it's a remarkable product.
Yeah, it is. With HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. There are no trips to the grocery store, no planning, no menus, no grocery list, and no wasted ingredients. So count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Even if you're new to cooking, you'll be able to whip up tasty restaurant-style meals in your kitchen in less time than it takes to get delivery without the high price tag of takeout. Talk about a money saver. Plus, HelloFresh has tons of options for every taste. Your whole family will find something they love thanks to HelloFresh's ever-changing menu, which has over 50, I get that, 50 recipes each week. You can take your pick from over 100 market add-on items like desserts, breakfast, and snacks. It's a great way to break a takeout addiction and level up your cooking skills. James and I always feel great preparing food for our families after switching to HelloFresh. It's a great excuse to get everyone together. You know, you're going to love how HelloFresh works with your schedule, and the produce travels from the farm to your door in less than a week for peak freshness that you can taste. Their plans are flexible, and you can change your meal preferences, update your delivery date, and change your address with a few taps on the HelloFresh app. So don't wait. Right now, they have a special deal for you. Get 10 free meals at HelloFresh.com/free war room. Applied across 7 boxes. New subscribers only, varied by plan. That's 10 free HelloFresh meals just by going to HelloFresh.com/free war room. You can also get the link to this deal from HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit, in the show notes. We have 2 of America's great pollsters, Whit Ayers, a Republican, and Jim Gerstein, a Democrat, with surveys of reliable polls showing a toss-up presidential race. They're going to tell us what we think, because we sure as hell don't know. Both candidates delivered their final messages this week, one in Madison Square Garden, one on the Ellipse. Let me ask you both how effective those messages were and what, if anything, they can do in the closing 5 days. Start with you, Jim.
Hi, well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here with everybody. I think that the Harris event and the Trump event could not be bigger contrasts. And for those undecided voters that are still out there, there's not a lot of them, but for those undecided voters who are still making their decision between the two of them, as well as deciding whether or not to even vote, I think the contrast between Harris's speech and what happened at the Trump rally works in her favor. And in an election where you've got basically 7 dead heat races in these presidential battleground states, everything matters. And that was that particular event, contrast of events, I think works in her favor.
Whit, pick up on that, and is there anything they can do in the final 4 or 5 days to go after that small slice of undecideds?
Well, it's very difficult to know what would actually move someone who, at this stage in this race, is still undecided. The very worst focus groups I've ever done were of undecided voters in a week before a presidential election. Well, you know, I need to do some more research here before I can make up my mind. It's like trying to get blood out of a stone to get some insight from undecided voters. The real question is whether they're going to vote at all or not. What we do know, Al, is that undecided voters frequently don't break 50-50. They tend to gravitate toward one or the other candidate in the late stages of the race, depending on things that happen right up coming up on the election. It was only 11 days before the 2016 election that James Comey announced he was reopening the FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton, which clearly cost her some votes. So it's really hard to know, but you know, the 7 swing states may split 4 for one and 3 for the other, but it wouldn't surprise me if they would split, 6 or 7 to one or the other of these candidates. We know that Trump has gotten stronger over the course of the last couple of weeks. But what that means is that the numbers have become tighter, not necessarily that he has developed a lead. And so it's really, really challenging to know which way this thing is going. You can say that Trump has closed the gap, but you can't say he's ahead.
Whit, in both 16 and 20, the pre-election polls in all the blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and a few of the other states, not Georgia, but a few of the others, underestimated Trump's support with low propensity voters. And so therefore they underestimated the outcome to his disadvantage. Do you sense, and if you're doing this, are the polls adjusting for that this time?
Al, we know that the polls underestimated Donald Trump's support in 16 and 20, as you said. We also know they underestimated Democratic support in 22. So basically what you're asking, and we know why the polls underestimated Trump's support. It was because of what pollsters call non-response bias, which is simply a fancy term for there are a bunch of Trumpies who won't talk to us. And it's very difficult to adjust for people who won't talk to you. You can't know for sure whether there are a lot of them out there. And the only way we'll know for sure is after the votes are cast. So while pollsters have done a lot to address the problems in 16, such as making sure we have the appropriate proportion of non-college white voters in the sample, there's no real way to know if there's some sort of hidden vote for either Harris or for Trump that's lurking out there that we haven't found.
Jim, you told me, I think, before that you and other pollsters were trying to adjust for these voters, and if you did it correctly, as Whit says, you can't be sure, but if you did it correctly, then it's a very tight race in all 7 states. If, on the other hand, you might have overcorrected, which is always a possibility, then maybe it's not quite as close as it looks. Is that a fair summation?
It is. And I'd first start by saying that it's really nice to hear Whit speak, because even though we're on opposite sides of the aisle, I think we're looking at this very similarly and what the challenges are and how this works out, as opposed to some of when we both see all of these media polls that are all over the place. And it just strikes me the consistency between political pollsters or campaign pollsters and how they approach these challenges and how they see the challenges.
Jim, when I do things with Democrats, people are expecting, we're going to have crossfire. We're going to have a lot of mudslung. We're looking at the same data. That's the reason we kind of sound alike, is because we're looking at the same data. Excuse me, Jim, go ahead.
Sure. No, it's absolutely. And I think that you did summarize how I look at this, and that is, if you believe in what Whit referred to as non-response bias, if you believe there is non-response bias with Trump voters, people who are Trump voters but not willing to talk to pollsters in these presidential year elections when he is on the ballot, then you're making an adjustment to try and capture them. And if you, in what I've seen in the range of hundreds of polls that I've looked at, when that adjustment is taken into account, you pretty much have this dead heat even race. And when you don't, you can see it fluctuate in a couple of different directions, but typically better for Harris. And what that tells me, and as you said, we don't know whether or not those voters are going to turn out to vote. And if they do, if those lower propensity Trump voters do not turn out to vote, we have a lot of evidence do turn out to vote, we have a lot of evidence in our internal polling that we are in a dead heat. If they don't, if they are tired of the Trump act, if they're just less motivated, whatever the reason may be, if they don't turn out to vote, then I think Harris is in a very good position, as are Democrats up and down the ballot. But we don't know the answer to that just yet.
Yeah, we'll pick up on that, then I'll turn it over to James.
Okay, it's interesting that the Trump forces are far more optimistic than the Harris forces right now, or than Democrats in general. And I don't know whether that's the Trump folks are looking at data that we haven't seen, or whether it's just typical Trump bravado. And I don't know whether it's because Democrats are looking at data we haven't seen, or whether it's just because Democrats are the Eeyore party. We're going to screw it up again. Everything's horrible. Oh, we're going to mess it up. I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
I would be surprised if they're looking at data that you two, the reliable data that you two aren't looking at. But James, go ahead.
So Whit, you touched on something I want to talk about. That's Democratic culture as opposed to Republican culture. All right, everything is awful. All right, for Democrats, Republicans, we're going to win. Tara Palmieri said the Republicans are all jazzed up about the early vote in Pennsylvania. Well, a couple people in Pennsylvania didn't know, so there's no reason to be jazzed up or jazzed down about it. It's, about online for what you'd expect. But there's a bias toward bad news. So some guy, and they put out fake polls like if you change the polling average, it's going to change somebody's mind. I mean, the amount of effort that goes into trying to rig polls. Or this guy, Bad Ombre, says that said that Harris is going to lose, and she's even going to lose New Hampshire and Virginia. Why do these people do? What do they think they're doing? I mean, and all my friends, Republican friends that are now for Harris, they're just mystified by Democratic culture. So, James, these people are whining about everything. They can't do the shit. We used to just write ahead of it, Mike Murphy, and good God Almighty, man, just take out sharp objects and start throwing them. They can't do that. But what is it about? Do you have any insight? I mean, you and Jim look at the same numbers, and most pollsters I know rather tell you you're losing. Oh, yeah, you're not, well, shit, you didn't do what I said. You didn't talk about the middle class enough. That's why you 0.7 points down or something. But what is it about these people that they're so into rigging fucking polls?
James, you're a lot more familiar with the Democratic culture than I am, but the Eeyore example does strike me as true. Very, very accurate.
It's so true. If you get a chance, watch the documentary he did on me. It really plumbs the depths of Democratic negativity. But I'm not shitting you. It's terrible out there. Okay, I talk to people about them, listen and say, it's neither terrible or good. It's just, far as we can tell, it's kind of even.
James, we just did a survey in Pennsylvania. We got out of the field 4 or 5 days ago. 47-47. I don't know what you do with that other than say it's a dead heat, Our tools are not precise enough to distinguish between a 49-48 Harris lead and a 49-48 Trump lead. They're just not.
Let me ask both of y'all, but it is a maximum of this business. And I think over years is a truism that the incumbent gets what they poll. So if you have it 47-47, but who is the incumbent in this race? It's not that's the question. You have a theory, Jim? Whit, go ahead.
Well, I think that America
I think you buy that generally, but I don't know who the incumbent is.
Well, that's why it was so important for Harris to disentangle herself from Trump if she could, and why that comment on The View that she couldn't think of anything she'd do differently was so devastating, and why it made its way immediately into a Trump ad. America wants to fire Bidenomics. America thinks Bidenomics has been a failure, that they're worse off than they were before. They want to get rid of Bidenomics. And Harris has got to somehow articulate a vision which is different from Bidenomics. Otherwise, she becomes the incumbent, James, with exactly the kind of dynamic you just articulated.
Look, it's the tension between Trump is there. I mean, Trump sucks up the oxygen. And, all he has to do is say one nutty thing because it's so outlandish that people are going to flock to it. In that sense, and people know him. I mean, in that sense, his being such a known entity has that sense of incumbency to it. She, of course, is the sitting vice president, and so which has the stronger power of incumbency here. I like to think it's more Trump, but she has tried very hard, and it's been one of her primary strategic imperatives to show that she is not a continuation of the Biden administration, that she represents a new generation, and she's, as she calls it, turning the page and looking forward. I think she's done a pretty good job overall of making that case. Obviously, there's been various things that pushed against that during the course of the election, and I'm not going to a week out, not going to relitigate or whatever. Look at at what's gone right and what's gone wrong at every point in the election. But I think she's done a good job of trying to make that case, and Trump has helped a little bit in terms of just continuing to say one outrageous thing after another, contrary to what his campaign wants him to do. The difference between the campaign that they're running in paid communications, between the campaign he is running in rallies and free media and Fox is just, you couldn't be different. It's two different campaigns.
So I just asked one question, turn it back now. So Chris LaCivita made $22 million. It's been a while since I've been in the business, but that's kind of fucking money y'all making, $22 million.
I think I went into
James, you're going to come out of retirement.
Yeah, shit, man. I got to come off the bench here.
Is he actually going to pay the bills, though? James,
they're all stealing. They're all stealing from each other.
I do want to say one thing about the difference in optimism within as it relates to polling within the two camps. If you're a Trump pollster, it's probably hard to go to him with a poll he doesn't like and show it to him. And so you wonder if there is two sets of data floating around that campaign that produces false hope for him, because they're afraid to tell him they're probably afraid to tell him he's tied, because in his eyes, this is a landslide. So I do wonder what the inner workings are like there and what information he's getting. He's obviously getting information from J.D. Vance about eating dogs and cats in Ohio. And so I'm sure he's getting a selected version of information that continues to shape his understanding of his own reality.
Let me ask, I think we agree there's an uncertainty about the low propensity voter, which could, help Trump. There is, I think it's fair to say there's a little bit of an uncertainty about whether this is one of those rare times where the ground game or get out the vote could make a difference. I don't know that it will, but if that does, it helps Democrats. Let me ask you about a couple other issues and whether you think they have an impact in the presidential year. Sean Trend, who I think is a very smart Republican analyst, wrote the other day that he thought the Democrats were being undervalued in particularly Arizona and Nevada because abortion is on the ballot. And he said every time abortion's on the ballot, it brings out more votes than even the polls suggest. That's been true in referendum. It's been true in 22 and in that special election. But is that likely to still be true in a presidential year, or is a presidential year different? Let me start with you, Whit.
Oh, I think it's definitely likely to be true. Why do you think Karl Rove wanted some same-sex marriage referenda on the ballot in 2004? Those things work. That worked. And we've seen what abortion does when it's an issue on the ballot by itself, even in as red a state as Kansas. And so it makes perfect sense. What Sean says could be exactly right, that it's going to juice a Democratic, particularly female turnout, I think, in states where it's on the ballot.
Here's the reason why I think it's still relevant. The Supreme Court has not overturned Dobbs. Okay. What has made people so angry still exists, and nothing has changed to their abortion rights or their concerns over abortion rights have not been restored. And so this is as important as it was in 2022. especially in these House races that are not taking place in presidential battleground states, and where the campaigns are able to try and have a contrast between candidates, as well as in Senate races. So but from the presidential perspective, if Harris is able to pass that threshold of credibility on the economy and on immigration, which I think she has gone a long way towards doing, against a headwind as the sitting vice president, and being credible as being seen to be credible as a presidential candidate, and people could see her as commander in chief, which I think she has gone a long way toward doing. They can become a heavy, can pivot on the issue of abortion, as I think it should, and as I think the Democrats are trying to. And you can see it as to why she went down to Texas. I mean, she's not expecting to win the vote in Texas, but it is a very good way of drawing attention and talking about abortion rights, which I think she did quite well in that speech.
Well, let me ask you about another, and that is ticket splitting. I mean, in a polarized political environment, ticket splitting is generally much less common than it used to be. I was in North Carolina for 4 days last week, and I think even Republicans acknowledge that their somewhat challenged gubernatorial candidate, to put it charitably, is going to lose by double digits. Some think as much as 20 points. I think that's probably an exaggeration. But everybody agrees that the presidential race is basically tied. Wow, that's a lot of ticket splitters.
We had a lot of ticket splitters in Pennsylvania last time, with
we did
going down in flames. So, it is. You're exactly right. It's much less than it used to be, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Particularly when you have as toxic a candidate as the Republicans have for governor in North Carolina.
Yeah. Pick up on that, Jim, because they're well ahead in the governor's race, but they're also running ahead, I'm told, and I think Republicans basically agree, lieutenant governor, attorney general, public instruction, other things. But none of that so far has moved the dial much in the presidential race in North Carolina.
Right. I mean, we saw more ticket splitting in 2022 than we had in recent years. I think that when you have a tied presidential race, any ticket splitting is going to impact the Senate race in that state. And so whether it's a tiny bit or whether it's it can still make a decisive difference. I think North Carolina, clearly Josh Stein is in a very, very strong position to win. And
you're really going on the limb, Jim.
Well, I'm trying to be polite or generous here in the spirit of the day, but the presidential is a toss-up, and so there is clearly going to be ticket splitting there. The other statewide races in North Carolina are a dead heat as well. So at least as we see it. So I think the key thing about when I look at ticket splitting, who are these voters? It's the independent voters. And going back to the issue of abortion, especially among independent women, this is the deal breaker issue for them. And we ask in our polls very specifically if there's an issue that you cannot, that causes you not to be able to vote for one of the candidates, and abortion is consistently at the top of the list, and it is particularly powerful and strong with these voters that I think are making the difference in the election. That is the independents, especially the independent women.
James Carville, before you come out of retirement and rake in all that money, would you please wrap this up with our two great guests?
Okay, so I'll just get y'all to respond to just the theory that I have.
Little louder.
Democrats are not going to replicate the 2020 coalition, particularly among non-whites. They neither share nor percent of vote. And if Harris wins, she's going to win among whites by more, in particularly college white males or kind of semi-Republican leaning. I don't expect her to do as well with the non-white vote, but kind of think she'll do better with the white vote. Is that in any way hold water? It doesn't hold water with either one of you.
James, what we know from polling so far is that Harris is holding about at the same Biden level with college-educated whites. But as you said, she's substantially weaker with blue-collar, Hispanic, and African-American men. Now, the proportion of college-educated whites in the national electorate is up 3 or 4 points from where it was in 2020. And so that indicates that she might be able to offset it, but we won't really know. What it does tell us is that her best route is the Joe Biden route, and that is through the northern states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, rather than through the Sun Belt states that are more diverse.
So the only thing I'd add is a pretty reliable guy. I'm in Georgia right now. The movie said she's getting 32% of the whites in Georgia. If she gets that, she hits the number. Right? I mean, that's pretty about where you need to be, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Georgia is curious. In 2020, 30,000 voters went to the polls and skipped the presidential race and then voted Republican down ballot, which is how all the down ballot Republicans won. But Joe Biden won the state by less than 12,000 votes, even though 30,000 skipped the presidential ballot. I don't know how we pick that up in our polling. You know, I mean, does it come out, if they're going to skip, does it come out as undecided or undeclared or refused? But that's another question mark in my mind, is how many people are going to go vote and then just skip the presidential ballot because they don't want to vote for either one.
So, Jim, you buying the Carville theory that we might not do as well with non-whites as 2020, but we'll do better with whites? Or are you skeptical of that?
Carville theory, I think it's hard. These are the hardest populations to poll: the Black population, the Hispanic population, younger voters. And I don't know if we're going to match Biden numbers, but I don't know. I would be surprised if we fall well short of them. It's going to vary from state to state. The Hispanic population in Nevada is quite different than the Hispanic population in Arizona in terms of how they're voting right now and how they're performing. James, I have to say, in the realm of hopefulness, to your point earlier, as I look for signs of hope or good things in a race that is a
You're
toss-up.
the only Jewish Democrat in the country that's looking for signs of hope. Go ahead. Because all of us on the street have no hope. Go ahead.
I am not going to dispute that notion, but I will say one thing that we've found in the polls in the last couple of weeks, since early voting has started, is very hard to read into all the different early voting numbers that the secretaries of state are putting out because it's a different dynamic this year. But when we look at the people who say they have already voted, we are outperforming relative to 2020's performance among the people who already voted. So what that tells me is, for the first time in our polling, because up until now, we have not seen Harris outperforming Biden in his 2020 vote in pretty much any poll. But we have this interesting data point of people who have already voted telling us that they are voting that outperforming Biden among those who have already voted, and that controls for partisanship. It controls for all sorts of things that could throw that out of whack. That's a hopeful sign in my eyes.
So before you let you go, Texas Senate. But Colin have a shot or no shot?
I think, and I would say that we went. Texas had about 9 million people vote for it in 2016. That moved up to 11.3 million in 2020. And points in 16, Biden lost by 5.5. We now have an additional 3.3 million registered voters in Texas. It's more Democratic than Republican, and the electorate there is changing. our last poll that we released publicly was even.
And that was your poll, right? That wasn't
even in the Senate race.
Right. This is I think he is a phenomenal candidate. Texas is a tough state, no doubt, but there is a trend going there in terms of the number of people voting and the new voters being a little more Democratic, that I think has a good shot against Ted Cruz.
Let me just ask Whit one more question, if you don't mind, James, and that is, you said you got out of the field in Pennsylvania 4 or 5 days ago. That means you didn't reflect, what is it, Bad Bunny? Bad Bunny is now rattling votes among the Puerto Ricans. And I must tell you that up until a couple days ago, please don't tell my kids this, I didn't know who Bad Bunny was. But I'm told by friends in Pennsylvania that Bad Bunny in that community is a big deal.
Now, let me weigh in on the Texas Senate race. Texas always impresses me as Lucy with a football. You know, the Democrats are like, come on, just spend a little more money here. And then she pulls the football away. But, you know, if she's ever going to keep it down there where they can hit it, it's going to be with Ted Cruz. I mean, the one thing I know about that race is if the members of the Senate were voting, Allred would win 99-1.
if the one knew him, I'll just say this. Of course, you expect me to say, but Colin is a much better candidate than Beto. He's a very humble, kind of down to earth guy.
It's hard to paint a Baylor football player as a left winger. But in any event, we'll
lecturing Colin Allred on sports is comical.
He said the only position he ever played was left out.
You guys are absolutely terrific.
Okay, I just can't thank y'all enough.
There are no two better pollsters in America, and I mean, you're both. There's a 99% consensus. I'm not even sure where the 1% is, but thank you both, and we will be watching carefully. And if it goes in the other direction, we'll blame you two.
Y'all tell me where the $22 million is, because I'm coming fucking back. I can tell you that right now.
My pleasure, guys. Always enjoy this.
All right, thank you.
Voting season is here. So if you're in the Washington, D.C. area and want an ultimate inside look on the 2024 election, get tickets to Carville. Winning is Everything, Stupid, a new documentary by Matt Tynauer in theaters November 1st at the Angelical in D.C. The film follows our very own Mr. Carville through the current cultural and political landscape, and also delves into his marriage to Republican strategist Mary Madeline, offering an inside look at how they navigate their bipartisan life. So if you're looking for an unfiltered take on the state of politics, the Carville-Madeline dynamic, and the drama of the 2024 election, you definitely want to get tickets now. Director Matt Tynauer will be there for the special one-off screening on November 1st at 7 p.m. for a Q&A moderated by political strategist, CNN contributor, and James' partner in crime, Paul Begala. Spoiler alert, he's also in the documentary. So how much will people enjoy this behind-the-scenes look at elections starring you, James?
It's a good movie. I mean, that's about me. So you think I would be, but I don't have any doubt that anybody that watches that is going to find it entertaining. Right now I'm in Savannah, which is the 4th film festival, all utterly high-end film festivals who started in Telluride, we're at the Hamptons, we're at Middleburg, and now in Savannah, which is for documentaries is a really prestigious place to be. So we're very excited. Very, very excited. And we'll be on the road. But Matt's going to be there in Washington. He's done so many different films, and he's such an interesting guy with such a CV that you wouldn't believe, from Roy Cohn to Valentino to everything in between.
Boy, I'll tell you, I was at Middleburg. I saw it, of course, on my home television set, and also saw it at Middleburg. It was great at home. It was even better on the big screen. Get tickets now at carvilledoc.com/ticket. That's carvilledoc.com/tickets. For updates and some great behind-the-scenes content, follow James on Twitter @JamesCarville, and get this, and on his new TikTok @RealJamesCarville. You won't want to miss it.
get great wine at great prices with Naked Wines. Well, let's start with how great is a glass of wine. People have been drinking it for 20,000 years, and it seems to retain its popularity for good reason. And when you got a outfit like this that goes through and you get this quality wine for this price, you're not going to get that anywhere else. I promise you. And I drink a lot of wine, and this stuff is really good, and it's very, very, very cost efficient.
Well, this podcast is sponsored by Naked Wines because Naked Wines is a subscription service that directly connects you to the world's finest independent winemakers so you can get award winning wine delivered straight to your door. With our code War Room, you can get 6 bottles for just $39.99. That isn't cheap wine, that's good wine. You're getting 6 bottles for $39.99. Now, we hate going to the store and being paralyzed by the wine options and prices. It is to some extent a luck of the draw. Now you can get exactly what you want. You know you're getting quality wines, and you don't have to have those frustrating trips to the store. Plus, Naked Wine helps you take any meal to the next level with a perfect bottle for any occasion. Thanks to Naked Wines, you can share an amazing Italian dinner paired with a Scott Kelly 2022 Oregon Chardonnay. It'll be one to remember. But we're already picking out selection for the holidays. There's so many great options. And the best part, every bottle is a passion project from an independent winemaker. So you are literally making independent winemakers' dream come true. Naked Wines believes that great wine is an experience, and they're all about helping you connect with your friends, family, and community over a shared bottle of wine. Turn off the noise for the outside world and uncork a bottle to celebrate the little joys in life. We love that Naked Wines has been around for over 15 years and funds over 90 independent winemakers around the world. And don't forget, you can pause or cancel your subscription at any time. So even with a trip coming up, you can still enjoy Naked Wines before or after that much needed vacation. So now's the time. To join the Naked Wines community, head to nakedwines.com/warroom and put in our code WARROOM for both the code and passwords for 6 bottles of wine for just $39.99, shipping included. That's nakedwines.com/warroom and the code WARROOM for 6 bottles of wine for $39.99. You can also find the link in the show notes.
So let me add something about this product. That's $7 a bottle. Now, do me a favor. When you go to the supermarket, find a bottle of wine for $7. Now, this is not just a bottle of wine. These are independent winemakers, have their own vineyards, and make their own wine. It's almost, you cannot, if you do that, you're not going to replicate that.
My final outrage before the election is those pundits and political analysts who downplay the Trump threat. It is, in reality, as former conservative federal judge Michael Ludig says, quite simple. Trump does not believe in the rule of law or really democracy. Now, if you think that tax policy or building a wall on the border or tariffs or abortion is more important, then I suppose you can justify voting for him. But as stand-up Republicans led by the Liz Cheneys, whose policy difference with Kamala Harris are considerable, believe that our democratic freedoms are more important. That's what this election is about.
So I agree. I agree 100%. It just cracks me up. Like, oh, he doesn't mean it. And then he comes back and says, yeah, I meant it. I mean, people are just such fools. So I think the biggest story, everybody's got this, is most undercovered biggest story of this cycle. It's so big, it's so jaw-dropping. It's like I didn't really read it. So Dan Coates, right now, I think you've been around, who I don't know if I've ever met. He was, for over 2 years, the director of national intelligence under Donald Trump. He was appointed to this. This is the person in the United States government that sees more intelligence than any other person in the United States government. He knows everything that the CIA knows. He knows everything Defense Intelligence knows. He knows everything that the FBI knows. He knows everything the German intelligence knows or the Japanese intelligence knows or anything else. So that's Dan Coates' position in the Trump administration. He is, by everything that I know, a classic Republican. Indiana, came up to the party, apparently as a personal guy. Like I said, I don't know if I know him, was a standard issue, but, I'll say standard issue. He probably had a voting record of 98% of the time agreeing with the other Republicans. By any public estimation, a really deep red conservative Republican. He said, not somebody else, not some deep state leaker, that he and other people always suspected that Putin had something on Trump. Now think about that. Here's a guy who saw more intelligence than any other person in the country during the administration of Donald Trump, who is as a Republican as you could make up in your own mind, saying, I don't know, I think, I did, and a lot of people think he's kind of, Putin, in other words, he's being blackmailed. The man is telling you that right to your face. That's just a fact. And I'm just beside myself that I didn't work harder. I mean, we could have got the story out, or people don't know about it. And when I tell people about it, they look befuddled. Like they think I'm making it up. I'm not making it up.
No.
This is who this guy is, and
James,
this is what he
I wrote
said.
a profile of Dan Coates in the Wall Street Journal 30 years ago, and he was a thoughtful, very conservative, but honest man, and that's why he was respected in the Senate. He is a guy with, impeccable conservative credentials, but also a guy who is known for his integrity. And I agree, that's a extraordinary assertion.
Yeah, he's known. I've never heard I heard people. I'm sure I have. I don't remember. I don't like, his positions or his votes or something like. But I've never heard anybody say this guy's not a top flight guy. I've never heard anybody say he was dishonest or he was, racially motivated or anything like that. I mean, just a Midwestern kind of tight-ass conservative. But I mean, when this guy comes out and says this, what's wrong with people? I mean, what motivation does he have to say it? If
Dan
he didn't
Coates, John Kelly, John Bolton, Jim Mattis, Mark Esper, I could keep going, all work at high-level national security posts for Donald Trump, and they all say he is unfit for office. If that doesn't convince you, nothing will.
He said, right. He's saying something a little bit more. They saying that he's fascist to his bone. He's anti-democratic.
They're all making the same point.
What Coates is saying, but Coates' point. Let me just make a little distinction here. He's saying that he's being blackmailed by an adversarial foreign power.
Well, he's saying he's always wondered about that, and
well, if he says that out loud, what else could he say?
James, the point is that these are people, and you know what J.D. Vance's explanation of why all these people dislike him? Because he wouldn't do things like start a nuclear war with Russia or really wouldn't invade other countries. I don't know. It is amazing that 47 or 48% of the people are going to vote for him.
Get your wardrobe smelling fresh with laundry sauce. You know, I am a kind of smell freak, and I use this stuff. It's remarkable, you know. And people splash shit on your face. Your face is 7% of your body. Your clothes, your pants, your shirt, your torso, everything else is. This stuff just comes out smelling. It smells like you just came out of a piney woods or something. It's really good.
Yeah. Well, this podcast is sponsored by Laundry Sauce. Laundry Sauce created the world's best smelling laundry detergent in simple to use high performance pods. It has transformed doing laundry into a luxurious and exciting experience so you don't have to dread laundry day anymore. So, what's the secret sauce behind Laundry Sauce? They partnered with one of the top fragrance houses in the world, the same team behind many of your favorite designer scents. Now that we can pick from scents like Australian sandalwood, Egyptian rose, and Siberian pine, Laundry Day will never smell the same again. They've transformed the boring task of doing laundry into a luxurious sensory experience. Now it's no longer a dreaded chore. We went with the Australian sandalwood one night, and then you're looking fresh and enjoying a distinguished, relaxing scent. Apparently, our houses now have what the kids would call a vibe. To fill you in, Laundry Sauce was started back in 2021 by a team who were bored by the mundane, chemically smelling scents in the detergent aisle. So they sought out the world's number one fragrance house to bring beautiful, complex aromas made from high quality natural ingredients and put them in a powerful, stain fighting laundry pod. They've earned some of the funniest, most authentic reviews you'll ever read. After using Laundry Sauce, Chuck said, "My clothes smell good AF." Chuck, James, and I are going to agree with you. Laundry Sauce even makes scent boosters, dryer sheets, dryer balls, fabric softeners, and candles too. Plus, if you aren't happy, send back Laundry Sauce for a full refund. No questions asked. So now's the time to elevate your laundry ritual with Laundry Sauce. Head to laundrysauce.com/war room. Use the promo code War Room at checkout for 15% off. That's the best offer you'll ever find. But you must use our code War Room for 15% off your order. One last time, that's laundrysauce.com/war room. Promo code War Room for 15% off. You also can find the link in our show notes. All right, and now for our questions. Carrie in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey, wants to know, does the Madison Square Garden rally have any impact on undecided voters, James?
You know, thank you for that. And I should have talked about it a little bit more. I don't know who undecided, like Whit Ayers, I don't know if these people know. Boy, is it going to have an impact on Puerto Rican turnout? Yes. And let me address this because in my career, I worked in Puerto Rico. I actually worked for the status issue, which is always a big issue there. Puerto Ricans are very much different than people understand. They do not view themselves as white. They do not view themselves as black. They do not view themselves as mixed race. They don't really view themselves as what we would think of as Hispanic or Latino so much. They view themselves as Puerto Ricans. And that is they're more of a nation. In other words, they have their own Olympic team. They compete in the World Baseball Classic. It's way, way, way more attitudinally than a territory of the United States. Attitudinally, I think it's way more than just another island in the Caribbean or Atlantic or whatever side it's on. All right, and they are much, much. I don't want to say the word clannish because that's not the word I'm looking for. But they have their own flag. They have their own sense of pride. And he's going to pay for this. I'm telling you, he's going to pay.
Well, let's hope so. Charlie in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Oh, my man.
Charlie wants to know how we feel about Kamala agreeing that Trump is a fascist. When asked, Charlie says, I basically say, it's when your country is run like a mafia don or a drug kingpin. Would you focus on rewarding fealty and punishing disloyalty? Isn't that a better response? Going deeper, you're getting into definitions. You've had great historians like Timothy Snyder. You've had two of his generals say that he has all the elements of a fascist. What he is he's a thug who doesn't believe in democracy. It's that simple.
So let's say that Harris said that she's a fascist, okay? It's Harris' opinion. She's a political opponent. You could infer from that, or most people say, politics, I call a wide strike zone. And Trump calls her comrade Kamala somehow or another. That never offends anybody. It's not just her that's saying this. It's General Milley. He's probably the most accomplished soldier of the 21st century. It's General Kelly. It's McMaster's. It's John Bolton. Okay? The fact that this man has fascist impulses, that would be anti-democratic, racism, whatever you want to put under it. And people say, well, define fascist. Yeah, I'll define it for you, right? And they are saying this. And it's almost like she is the least credible person that's saying he's a fascist. There are people that have much more credibility, spend much more time around him, know him much better, probably have a deeper sense, and I'm not criticizing her, but all these, big thing in the military, you don't get to be a general unless you.
Well, she said it in response and answer to a question.
Right. But again, it's not so disturbing that she said it.
No.
It's so disturbing that so many other people have said it.
Right. It's what he is.
Yeah.
Pete, in Raleigh, North Carolina, says in 2022, Republicans led by a couple points in national polls, but they barely flipped the House and lost ground in the Senate. Is it possible Republicans are running up the score in red states while their electoral advantage is slipping?
So this is something that I personally think is underappreciated about the 2022 cycle. First of all, the polling was about as accurate as polling can be in an off year. And if anybody would have looked at the catalyst analysis of who voted in 2022, your first reaction would be, this is a pretty good Republican year. More Republicans, and that doesn't happen all the time, more Republicans voted in 2022 than actually Democrats did. And it goes back to my theory that I still have, and don't see much to dissuade me from it, that we're going to get a lot more Republican crossover votes. We're not going to get 15%. I know that. But you're going to get a lot more than he's going to get Democratic crossover votes. You get 2% maybe, all right? I think that's going to be a big factor in the outcome of this election. I know it was a big factor in 2022. I'm dead positive of that. In the terms of the popular vote, them running up the score, the Democrats running up the score, there's pretty broad consensus. I had an event last night in San Antonio with Carl Rove, who kind of said he does think that it's definitely not 3 points the Democrats have to win by. Now, no one knows if it's 1 point, a half a point, a point and a half, or anything like that. But that there is, we'll see. But I still think that Harris will win. I've been pretty clear about that. And I think when Catalyst comes out and the whole people do the whole review, it takes a while before we actually know. We'll know what happened on election night, why it happened, take a little bit while. But I think when we find out why it happened, it's going to be that there were more Republican crossovers than by a pretty significant number than Democratic crossovers.
Tony in Larkspur, California says Trump will contest the election in some form if he loses. What can the government do to prepare for this battle? Well, it's also what the Harris team can do. They've got, the best lawyers in the country, led by Dana Remus and Seth Waxman and Don Barilli. The Trump lawyers are better than the sorry lot they had last time, but I would still take the Harris lawyers. They're prepared for it. They're going to have to fight. The press has got to do a better job of pointing out what a scam this is, claiming there are illegal migrants voting, which of course is nonsense. I mean, just look at Glenn Youngkin. The only thing that worries me there, James, is that if this ultimately gets up to the United States Supreme Court, that worries me.
I cannot think 1 minute past poll closing, but I think there are other people that do need to think that. I have confidence that we got good lawyers that are on this, but I cannot. I'll deal with that if I have to deal with it. It does.
Okay.
It occupies no space in my mind.
All right. Well, this one might. Jeff in Binghamton, New York says, why do Republicans only care about gun violence when immigrants are involved, not when there's school shooting?
It's a good question, though. And the truth of the matter is the number of immigrants, or let's just say what's the word you're supposed to use, whatever, the non-citizen people here, their crime rate among this is significantly lower than it is among native-born Americans. It happened here. I'm in Georgia. It was unfortunate, but it's much rarer. They exaggerate everything. It's horrifically exaggerated story. Just like I was in Texas and I was watching, because I had the World Series on. I happened to be watching the local Fox News, not the Fox News Network, but the sports Fox. And it was all transgender and reproductive rights. There's so few transition surgeries and murders of American citizens by non-citizen, not born here people. It's almost infinitesimal. And it's just stunning that this is what they run. They must think this works because they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars promoting it. I don't think I know a transgender person. I mean, I probably do, and I just don't know or don't care.
Well, I know a couple, but it's not, it's just, I mean, it's just outrageous what they're really trying to do.
It's the idea that the people
having been in North Carolina, they are blanketing the airwaves with that. You would think this is what this election is about.
It's in Texas, I can tell you.
Right.
I mean, it was the San Antonio, good mornings or whatever they call it, San Antonio morning or something, because I fell asleep.
James, our final pre-election question is from Dave in Newfoundland, Canada. He said, should the Democrats be talking more about health care? I don't hear a lot about it. It seems it would help races. And by the way, I would add, Mike Johnson the other day said we are going to repeal the Affordable Health Care Act.
Yeah, I appreciate it, but I guess I would frame the question, should they have talked more about it? It's not too late now to talk about anything. And the other thing is, you don't hear Democrats talk about anymore is education. It just fell off the face of the earth as an issue. I mean, healthcare and education were 15, 16 years ago, were the gold standard Democratic issues. And I guess with Trump, that's the problem with him. He puts so much on the plate, you just don't know what to eat. And, it's kind of confusing. We've lost, issues that people care about that we have huge advantages on, huge record on. He said 100 times he wants to get rid of it. The Rick Scott plan, the Mike Johnson stuff, could this be a missed opportunity? The answer is yes.
Yeah, I think education is important. Healthcare is a better contrasting issue, particularly when they say they're going to repeal the Affordable Health Care Act, which 8 years ago was not particularly popular, and today it is.
Yeah, it's kind of traditional bread and butter Democratic issues. I think abortion is like...
Okay, we're going to be back next week. We may not even know the outcome by the time we're back next week.
We'll
know more than we know now.
We don't know.
So stay tuned, and we'll see you then. Okay, thanks for listening to Politics 101 with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Remember to get your tickets for the Politics War Room Tour. James and I are bringing the podcast to you live on stage this Saturday night at Boston Schubert Theater, November 2. That's only 2 days away, so get tickets now at politicon.com/tour. We can't wait to see you there. As always, send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show at Politicon. Following this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you check out the links to our sponsors, HelloFresh, Naked Wines, and Laundry Sauce in our episode show notes. We thank you for supporting them because when you do, you help make this podcast happen. Now, to keep up with us, subscribe to Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And check out our Substack at politicswarroom.com. James and I are constantly adding new content, so go take a look. You also can find other shows you might enjoy on the Politicon YouTube channel or when you search Politicon on your favorite podcast sites. Now remember, please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with our critical post-election show as we continue War Room planning.